A deserted road, a storm rolling in, two children left behind with no way out. Jana McCarthy didn't look back. In her mind, the problem was solved. Jana, with a smirk, they won't last the night. But days later, a knock at the door shattered her certainty. A chilling mystery unfolds. Now, stay with me, you won't believe what happens next, and tell me, where are you watching from today? Hook, could the past come back to haunt her in the most unexpected way? They're dead by now, Jana whispered to herself, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the sink, trying to steady herself. The sound of rain beating against the window couldn't drown out the echo of their screams in her mind. 10-year-old twins, Adam and Teresa, their faces streaked with tears as she drove away, leaving them on that deserted road, 50 miles from home. She had planned it meticulously. With Bruce's death a month ago, the life insurance money would be hers alone, no stepchildren to share it with, no reminders of the life her husband had before her. The twins were the only thing standing between her and a fresh start. Who would suspect anything? A grieving widow, devastated by the mysterious disappearance of her stepchildren in the wake of their father's tragic death. The detective had been sympathetic during his visit yesterday. Mrs. McCarthy, we're doing everything we can to locate Adam and Teresa. Sometimes children run away when dealing with grief, it's more common than you'd think. She had nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, playing the part of the concerned stepmother perfectly. Jana opened the medicine cabinet, reaching for her sleeping pills. She hadn't slept properly since that night, haunted by guilt and fear. The forecast had called for rain, hypothermia would take care of everything. No evidence, no witnesses, just another tragic story of lost children never found. The doorbell rang. Jana froze, the pill bottle slipping from her fingers and clattering into the sink. It was nearly midnight. The house stood at the end of a private road, surrounded by acres of woodland. Nobody came here unannounced, especially not at this hour. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Her heart pounding, Jana crept down the stairs. Through the frosted glass panels flanking the front door, she could make out three silhouettes, two small ones and one tall adult figure. Jana, open the door. The voice made her blood run cold. It couldn't be. She recognized the deep, gentle tone, the slight catch in the pronunciation of her name. It was Bruce's voice. Her hands shaking violently now, Jana reached for the door handle. The locks clicked open, one by one, each sound like a gunshot in the quiet house. She pulled the door open slowly, and the porch light illuminated the impossible. There stood Adam and Teresa, their clothes muddy but otherwise unharmed, their small faces set in expressions she had never seen before. And behind them, his hand resting protectively on their shoulders, stood Bruce, her husband, the man whose funeral she had arranged 4 weeks ago. "Hello, Jana," Bruce said softly, "we need to talk about what you did." The world spun around her as Jana gripped the doorframe for support. This wasn't possible. She had identified his body herself after the accident. She had watched them lower his casket into the ground. "Aren't you going to invite us in?" Teresa asked, her young voice carrying an edge that made Jana's skin crawl. "It's only polite, isn't it? That's what you always taught us about being a proper family." Adam reached into his pocket and pulled out something that glinted in the porch light, a small voice recorder. "We have something you might want to hear, Jana, something about a long drive and a deserted road." Jana's legs gave way beneath her as the implications hit her. How had they survived? Who was the man who looked exactly like Bruce? And most importantly, what exactly had they recorded? Jana sat rigid on her living room sofa, her manicured nails digging into the leather armrest. Across from her, the twins perched on the edge of their father's favorite armchair, while the man who looked exactly like Bruce stood behind them, his presence commanding and unsettling. 2 years ago, the man began, his voice identical to her husband's. You walked into Bruce's life like a guardian angel, a nurse who cared for his dying wife, who stayed to help with the twins afterward. It was a perfect story, wasn't it? Memories flooded Jana's mind. She had been patient, calculating. Marion's terminal illness had given her the perfect opportunity to integrate herself into the family's life. The grieving widower with 2 8-year-old children had been vulnerable, desperate for support. She had made herself indispensable. You played your part well, Adam said, his young voice steady. Dad trusted you completely, even when things started disappearing from Mom's jewelry box. Jana's throat tightened. She had been so careful, selling Marion's jewelry piece by piece in different cities, using the money to pay off old debts. Bruce had never suspected, attributing the missing items to his own forgetfulness during the chaos of Marion's illness. Teresa pulled out a small notebook from her backpack. Mom kept a diary. She wrote about her suspicions, about the missing morphine doses, about how her pain got worse whenever you were on duty. The little girl's eyes were hard, aged beyond her years. She tried to tell Dad, but by then she was too weak. Everyone thought the cancer was making her confused. That's ridiculous, Jana managed to say, but her voice wavered. Bruce died in a car accident. I identified his body. This is some sick joke. Did you? The man interrupted. Did you look carefully at the body, Jana, or were you in such a hurry to claim the insurance that you saw what you wanted to see? The truth hit her like a physical blow. The accident had left the body badly damaged. She had only glimpsed it briefly at the morgue, too distraught or too eager to look closely. The funeral had been closed casket at her insistence. My brother Matt was the one driving my car that night, Bruce said quietly. My twin brother, who had come to warn me about you. He had been investigating your past, Jana, the string of wealthy patients who died under your care, the grieving families you tried to integrate yourself into. He was on his way to show me the evidence when his brakes failed. Jana's mind raced. She hadn't known about a twin brother. Bruce rarely spoke about his family, and she had never pushed, playing the understanding wife who respected his privacy. The similarities would have been enough to fool a brief morgue identification, especially if the viewer didn't expect to see anyone else. We found Dad hiding in Uncle Matt's cabin, Adam continued. He was gathering evidence, working with the police. He knew something was wrong when you started changing his coffee to decaf, just like you did with Mom before she got sick. Teresa finished, really sick, not just the cancer. The voice recorder sat between them on the coffee table, a silent threat. Jana's eyes darted to it, then to the windows, calculating. The neighbors were too far away to hear screams. If she could reach the gun hidden in the hallway cabinet. Don't, Bruce said softly, reading her thoughts. The police are already on their way. Detective Morrison has been building this case for months. The twins' disappearance was the final piece they needed. A siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. Jana felt the walls closing in. You can't prove anything, she whispered, but even she didn't believe it anymore. Teresa stood up, her small frame somehow towering in the moment. We recorded everything, Jana, that night in the car when you thought we were sleeping. You talked to yourself the whole way about Dad, about Mom, about all of it. We had Dad's old phone, the one you thought you threw away. It recorded everything. The siren was very close now. Red and blue lights began to flash through the windows, painting the room in alternating colors. Jana saw her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, years of planning undone by the 2 children she had underestimated so catastrophically. As police cars pulled into the driveway, Bruce stepped forward, his face a mask of controlled anger and grief. The twins survived that night because they're their mother's children, Jana. They're survivors, just like Marion was. She taught them to be strong, to be clever, to look out for each other. The very qualities you tried to use against them brought you down. The front door burst open, and Detective Morrison led a team of officers into the room. As they read her rights and closed handcuffs around her wrists, Jana caught a final glimpse of the family she had tried to destroy. Bruce held his children close, their faces buried in his chest, their small bodies finally allowing themselves to tremble with the fear and trauma they had held at bay for so long. The last thing she heard as they led her away was Teresa's voice, strong despite its quiver. "Mom was right about her, Dad." She wrote it all in her diary. She knew Jana would try to hurt us someday. She told us to be brave. Jana's perfectly planned new life disappeared into the back of a police car, while behind her, a family she had failed to destroy began the long process of healing together. 3 days after Jana's arrest, the McCarthy family sat in Detective Morrison's office at the county police station. The twins hadn't left their father's side since the confrontation, as if afraid he might disappear again if they looked away for too long. The detective's office, with its warm wooden desk and walls covered in children's drawings from grateful families, provided a stark contrast to the sterile interrogation rooms where Jana was being questioned. "The evidence is overwhelming," Detective Morrison said, spreading photographs across his desk. "We've reopened cases from 3 different states. Jana Watson, or whatever her real name is, had this down to a science. She targeted terminally ill patients, integrated herself into their families, and then," he trailed off, glancing at the twins. "It's okay," Teresa said quietly. "We know what she did to Mom." Her small hand clutched her mother's diary, its pages now filled with sticky notes and evidence markers. "Mom knew something was wrong. That's why she started writing everything down." Bruce wrapped an arm around his daughter, fighting back tears. "Marion always was the smartest of us all, even at the end, when we thought the pain was making her confused." He couldn't finish the sentence. Adam pulled out his own notebook, much newer than his mother's diary. "We kept track too, Dad. After you started acting strange, drinking that weird coffee she made, Teresa and I took turns staying awake at night, watching your door. We saw her putting stuff in your drinks." Detective Morrison nodded, adding another file to the growing stack on his desk. The toxicology reports from Bruce's brother Matt's autopsy showed trace amounts of the same substances we found in Marion's system. Jana had been slowly poisoning Bruce too, but Matt's unexpected arrival forced her to act more drastically. "She didn't know about Matt," Bruce said, his voice hollow. "I hadn't spoken to my twin brother in years, not since our falling out over the family business, but he never stopped looking out for me." When he started investigating Jana's background, Bruce's hands clenched into fists. Teresa opened her mother's diary to a marked page. "Mom wrote here that she tried to warn the night nurse about Jana, but nobody believed her. They all thought Jana was an angel, helping the dying woman's family cope." Her voice carried a maturity far beyond her 10 years. "That's when Mom started teaching us her special games." Detective Morrison leaned forward, interested. "Special games?" Adam nodded. "Mom called them detective games. She taught us how to remember details, how to hide things so nobody else could find them, how to leave secret messages for each other. She made it fun, but now we know she was preparing us." "That's how they survived that night on the road," Bruce added, pride mixing with pain in his voice. "Marion had taught them to keep emergency supplies hidden in their clothes, to memorize landmarks and directions, to work together." The detective pulled out a map, marked with red lines. "Jana drove them nearly 50 miles from home, deep into the national forest. She chose a spot where the road winds through a valley, no cell service, minimal traffic, especially at night. She thought the rain and cold would." He stopped, seeing the twins' faces pale, but resolute. "We knew that road," Teresa said, her voice strengthening. "Mom used to take us camping there before she got sick." We recognized the old ranger station, even in the dark. As soon as Jana drove away, we walked there. The ranger on duty called the police. Detective Morrison continued, but by then Jana had reported them missing. She played the part of the grieving stepmother perfectly. If we hadn't already been building a case against her, Bruce stood abruptly, pacing the office. I should have seen it. All those months after Marion died, Jana was so perfect, so helpful. The twins tried to tell me something was wrong, but I thought they were just struggling with losing their mother. Dad, Adam said firmly, sounding so much like Marion that Bruce stopped in his tracks. Mom wrote about that too. She knew Jana would try to turn you against us. That's why she made us promise to be patient, to gather evidence, to wait for the right moment. Detective Morrison pulled out one final document, a transcript of the recording the twins had made. Jana confessed everything during that car ride, talking to herself, probably thinking the children were asleep. Between this recording, Marion's diary, the evidence from Matt's investigation, and the forensic reports, she'll never hurt another family again. A knock at the door interrupted them. Officer Joshi entered, her face grave. Detective, we found something at the McCarthy house. A hidden room in the basement, behind the wine cellar. There are records, dozens of families going back 15 years. The twins pressed closer to their father as Detective Morrison stood. I need to handle this. Take some time, talk to the counselor we discussed. What you've all been through, it's going to take time to heal. As the detective left, Teresa opened her mother's diary again, turning to the last page. In Marion's shaky handwriting, a message stood out. My dearest Adam and Teresa, if you're reading this, you've been stronger and braver than any children should ever have to be. Trust each other, protect each other, and remember that the truth always finds its way to the light. Your father's love for you is real, even if his judgment is clouded. Be patient with him, he'll find his way back to you. All my love, Mom. Bruce pulled his children close, their small bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. They had survived. They had fought. They had won. But as police officers hurried past the office window, carrying boxes of evidence, they knew their story was far from over. Somewhere in those records were other families, other victims, other lives destroyed by the woman who had almost destroyed theirs. Teresa looked up at her father, her mother's diary clutched to her chest. Dad, she whispered, I think Mom left us something else, something important in the diary. There are codes we haven't figured out yet. The McCarthy family gathered around their kitchen table that evening, Marion's diary open between them. The house felt different now. Police had swept it for evidence, removed hidden cameras Jana had installed, and cleared out her belongings. Yet traces of her presence lingered in the slight scuff marks on the hardwood floors, the empty spaces on shelves where her photos had stood, the lingering scent of her perfume in the master bedroom. Look at how Mom wrote the dates, Teresa said, pointing to entries from the months before Marion's death. She always used numbers instead of writing out the month, but some of them don't make sense. Here, she wrote 134 when April only has 30 days. Bruce leaned closer, his reading glasses perched on his nose. The familiar sight made Adam's throat tighten. It was something their father used to do every morning while reading the newspaper with Mom, before everything changed. Your mother was meticulous about dates, Bruce said. She wouldn't make that kind of mistake. It's like the treasure hunt games she used to make for us. Adam added, pulling out his own notebook where he'd been tracking patterns. Remember how she'd hide clues in ordinary things, the way she arranged magnets on the fridge or how she'd fold our napkins at dinner? Detective Morrison had assigned a protective detail to the house, and through the kitchen window, they could see Officer Hawkins's car parked discreetly across the street. The investigation into Jana's past had expanded rapidly, with law enforcement from multiple states converging on the case. Teresa started copying the unusual dates into a fresh notebook, 13422. If we treat them like coordinates, she worked methodically, just as her mother had taught her. Dad, can you get Mom's old atlas from the study? As Bruce left the room, Adam noticed his sister's hand trembling slightly. They hadn't slept properly since their ordeal on the deserted road. Nightmares plagued them both, of cold rain, of Jenna's voice humming softly as she drove them to what she planned as their death, of the long walk through darkness to the ranger station. Here it is, Bruce returned with the oversized book, its pages dog-eared and marked with post-it notes from family trips they'd planned but never taken after Marion got sick. Your mother loved this atlas. She used to say that every road tells a story if you know how to read it. Teresa flipped through the pages, stopping at maps marked with Marion's neat handwriting. Mom used to show us how to find safe places wherever we went. She said it was a game, but, she paused, her voice catching, she was teaching us survival skills, wasn't she? She knew something like this might happen. Bruce sank into a kitchen chair, the weight of guilt visible in his shoulders. Marion tried to tell me about Jana, about her suspicions, but Jana had already started the coffee, the subtle manipulations. I was so blind. It wasn't your fault, Dad, Adam said firmly, sounding older than his 10 years. Jana fooled everyone. That's why Mom left us these clues instead of just telling people. She knew no one would believe it without proof. Working together, they began to decode the dates in Marion's diary. Each set of numbers corresponded to map coordinates, leading to locations across 3 states. Teresa marked each spot with a red pin, and slowly, a pattern emerged. These are all places where Jana worked before, Adam realized, checking the locations against news articles on his father's laptop. Look, each one had a death that seemed natural at the time, terminal patients, grieving families. Bruce's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morrison, "Need you at the station." Bringing in Jana's former colleague from Memorial Hospital. She's ready to talk. I have to go, Bruce said, standing reluctantly. The twins immediately tensed, fear flashing across their faces. I'll only be gone an hour, and Officer Hawkins is right outside. Baker from the night shift will relieve her soon. You'll be safe. Teresa clutched her mother's diary tighter. We'll keep working on the codes. Mom left these clues for a reason. She wanted to help other families, didn't she? Even after she was gone. Bruce finished softly, that was your mother, always thinking of others, always fighting for justice in her own quiet way. As Bruce prepared to leave, Adam pulled out the voice recorder they'd used to capture Jenna's confession. Dad, can we play Mom's old voicemails while you're gone? The ones from before she got sick? Sometimes it helps, hearing her voice. Bruce felt his heart break and heal simultaneously. Of course, buddy. And when I get back, maybe we can look at some of the old photo albums, the real ones from before Jana, the ones your mom kept hidden in her craft room. The twins nodded, managing small smiles. They had learned to be strong, to be brave, but they were still children who missed their mother desperately. As Bruce drove to the police station, Teresa and Adam huddled together at the kitchen table, surrounded by maps, diaries, and memories. Teresa traced her finger along a route connecting Jana's previous locations, while Adam played Marion's saved voicemail softly in the background. Hey, sweethearts, just calling to remind you about our special ice cream date after school. Don't forget to bring your detective notebooks. Mommy has a new puzzle for her favorite sleuths. Suddenly, Teresa sat up straighter, her eyes wide. Adam, listen to that message again. The way Mom emphasizes certain words, I think she left us more than just map coordinates. There's something else hidden in her codes. Through the kitchen window, they saw Officer Hawkins's car pull away as Officer Baker arrived for the night shift, but something seemed off about the way the new patrol car parked slightly too far from the curb, at an angle their mother had taught them to recognize as a warning sign. Teresa's hand found Adam's under the table, squeezing in their secret signal for danger. Someone was watching the house, and it wasn't just the police protection detail. "Adam," she whispered, keeping her voice steady, just as their mother had taught them, "I think we need to call Dad right now." Teresa's fingers trembled as she dialed their father's number, keeping her voice low. "Dad, something's wrong. The new police officer, they're not parking like Mom taught us to recognize safe vehicles." Through the phone, they heard their father's sharp intake of breath, followed by Detective Morrison's voice in the background. "Bruce, we just got word Baker's shift doesn't start for another hour. Listen carefully." Bruce said, his voice taut with controlled fear, "Go to your mother's craft room. Remember the hidden panel she showed you behind the quilting frame?" The twins were already moving, years of their mother's safety drills guiding their actions. They kept away from windows, staying low, communicating through the hand signals Marion had taught them. Adam carried their mother's diary in his notebook, while Teresa grabbed the voice recorder and her backpack, always packed with emergency supplies, just as their mother had insisted. "Someone's at the front door," Adam whispered into the phone. Teresa held it between them. Through the craft room's small window, they could see a second unfamiliar car pulling up behind the fake police vehicle. "We're 7 minutes out," Detective Morrison's voice came through clearly now on speakerphone. "Security system shows all doors still secure. Stay in the craft room. Help is coming." But Teresa had already opened the hidden panel, revealing the narrow space between walls that Marion had converted into an emergency exit. "Mom said if we ever had to use this, it meant we were right about everything else," she whispered. The sound of breaking glass came from downstairs. "They're in," Adam breathed into the phone. "Dad, we have to use Mom's escape route, just like she taught us." "Go," Bruce commanded, his voice cracking. "Your mother knew. She knew something like this might happen. That's why she prepared you. Detective Morrison has your GPS signals from your emergency phones. We'll find you." The twins slipped into the narrow passage, pulling the panel closed behind them. Their mother had lined the space with glow-in-the-dark strips, creating a path only visible in darkness. They could hear footsteps moving through the house above them as they crawled through the tunnel Marion had somehow managed to create during her illness. She built this while everyone thought she was resting, Teresa realized, her voice barely a whisper. All those afternoons Jana thought Mom was sleeping. The passage led them to the old garden shed, emerging behind a false wall of garden tools. Through gaps in the weathered wood, they could see 2 men in police uniforms entering the house, while a woman in a nurse's uniform waited by one of the cars. "That's her," Adam breathed, "the nurse from Mom's night shift rotation, the one Mom wrote about in her diary, the one who always worked the same nights as Jana." Teresa's hand tightened around the voice recorder. Mom was right. Jana wasn't working alone. That's why she coded all those locations in her diary. They're not just places Jana worked, they're places her whole network operated. Adam finished. "Look," he pointed through another gap in the shed wall. A familiar car was parked further down the street, Officer Hawkins's vehicle. The real Officer Hawkins was slumped over in the driver's seat, apparently unconscious. Teresa pulled out one of the burner phones their mother had hidden in various locations around the property. Their own phones could be tracked, but these were prepaid, known only to them. She dialed the emergency number Marion had made them memorize. "Detective Morrison, we're safe, but Officer Hawkins is hurt. There are 3 of them, 2 men, 1 woman. They're Jana's partners from the hospital. We have proof in Mom's diary, but they're looking for it. They know she left evidence." The detective's response was immediate. "Backup is approaching silently. Your father and I are 2 minutes out. The GPS in Hawkins's car confirms your location. Stay hidden." Through the shed walls, They could hear the fake officers inside the house, their voices growing angry as they searched. The nurse by the car was speaking urgently into a phone. "They're getting desperate," Adam whispered, "just like Mom said they would." Page 93 in her diary, she wrote about how Jana's group would panic if their pattern was exposed. Teresa flipped through the diary with shaking hands, finding the page Adam mentioned. There, in Marion's careful handwriting, was a detailed description of what they were witnessing: the nurse who always worked with Jana, the network of fake first responders they used to cover their tracks, the way they would react if discovered. "Your mother," Detective Morrison had said earlier that week, "might have been the first person to ever document their entire operation. She knew she was dying, but instead of giving up, she spent her last months gathering evidence and preparing you." Sirens sounded in the distance, but unlike before, these were coming from multiple directions. The nurse at the car shouted a warning to her accomplices inside the house. The twins huddled deeper into their hiding space, watching through the gaps as emergency vehicles converged on their street. "Teresa," Adam whispered urgently, "listen to this." He had been reviewing their mother's last voicemails again through earbuds. In her last message, when she talks about her favorite garden flowers, she's actually describing where she hid her main evidence. She knew they'd look for her diary, but she put the most damaging proof somewhere else. Teresa's eyes widened as she looked around the garden shed with new understanding. Their mother, even in her final days, had been 10 steps ahead of everyone. And now, as police cars surrounded the house and Detective Morrison's voice boomed through a megaphone, they realized they were finally in position to expose not just Jana, but the entire criminal network she belonged to. Through the chaos of arrests and sirens, they heard their father calling their names. But before they revealed their location, Teresa pulled Adam close and whispered, "Mom hid her real evidence in the flower bulbs, didn't she? The one she made us promise never to move or replant?" Adam nodded, tears mixing with a determined smile. "She always said gardens were the best place to bury secrets. We need to tell Dad and Detective Morrison what's really growing in Mom's tulip bed." The garden looked different in the harsh glare of police floodlights. Marion's carefully tended tulip beds, which had bloomed faithfully every spring since her death, were now surrounded by crime scene tape as forensics teams carefully excavated each bulb cluster. "Your mother was extraordinary," Detective Morrison said, watching as his team unearthed another waterproof container hidden among the flower bulbs. "She didn't just document Jana's crimes, she tracked the entire network's activities across 3 states. Bruce stood with an arm around each twin, all 3 watching as years of their mother's secret work came to light. The fake police officers and their nurse accomplice had been arrested, and the real Officer Hawkins was recovering in the hospital from the drugs they'd used to incapacitate her. Mom used to spend hours out here, Teresa said softly, even when she was so sick. She insisted on tending her garden. Jana thought the fresh air was good for her, but she was actually hiding evidence, Adam finished. Every time she planted new bulbs, she was really building a case against them. Inside each waterproof container, they found USB drives, documents, and photographs Marion had methodically gathered, financial records, overheard conversations, and correspondence that revealed the full scope of Jana's organization. She had documented how they identified vulnerable families, how they manipulated medical records, how they covered their tracks. Mrs. McCarthy's last garden project was 3 months before she died, one of the forensics officers reported, holding up a soil-stained notebook. According to this, she mapped every piece of evidence she buried. The tulip patterns aren't random, there are codes showing exactly where to dig. Bruce sank onto the garden bench where he used to sit with Marion on summer evenings. "All those times I thought the illness was making her confused, making her paranoid. She was actually fighting to protect our children, to expose these criminals, and I didn't see it." "You weren't supposed to see it, Dad," Teresa said, taking his hand. Mom wrote in her diary that Jana's group was expert at manipulating people, especially grieving families. That's why Mom had to work in secret. Detective Morrison approached with a tablet, displaying files from one of the recovered drives. Your wife didn't just document crimes, she built an entire case: bank records, insurance policies, medical charts showing tampering. She even identified other victims' families we can now contact. A young officer hurried over with another discovery, a small video camera still functional despite years in its waterproof case. Sir, you need to see this. It contains footage of conversations between Jana and her accomplices, recorded from Mrs. McCarthy's hospital room. They gathered around the tablet as the footage played. Marion had positioned the camera perfectly to capture Jana's late-night meetings with her co-conspirators, their whispered conversations clear in their entirety. But it was the last video that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Marion's face filled the screen, recorded in what they recognized as her final days. Despite her illness, her eyes were clear and determined. If you're watching this, she began, it means my children found my clues and understood my warnings. Adam, Teresa, I am so proud of you both. Everything I did, every code and clue and hidden message, was to protect you from what I knew was coming. Jana's group has destroyed many families, but they didn't count on a mother's love being stronger than their schemes. Bruce gripped his children's hands as Marion continued. To the police, who I pray are investigating this, in my garden you'll find evidence of 47 cases spanning 15 years. Jana Winters, if that's even her real name, is just one part of a larger network. Every flower bed contains proof of their crimes, every tulip bulb holds a piece of the puzzle. I planted the truth in my garden, knowing it would bloom when the time was right. The video continued, Marion's voice growing weaker but her resolve remaining strong as she detailed names, dates, and locations. She had created a comprehensive map of the criminal organization's activities, all disguised as a dying woman's garden hobby. Bruce, she said finally, her face softening with love, my wonderful husband, don't blame yourself. These people are professionals at manipulation and deceit. I knew that directly confronting them would put our family in danger, so I chose to fight them in my own way. The garden you thought was my peace in my final days was actually my battlefield. Adam pulled out his mother's diary, its pages now heavy with evidence markers. Look at this entry, Dad. The day before she started her last round of tulip planting, Mom wrote, they think I'm just a dying woman playing in her garden. They don't realize that every flower I plant is another nail in their coffin, every bulb a piece of evidence that will bloom into justice. Detective Morrison's phone buzzed with updates from other jurisdictions. Jana's arrest had triggered a cascade of investigations, and Marion's evidence was providing the keys to unlock dozens of cold cases. They're finding more victims, he reported. Families who lost loved ones under suspicious circumstances. Your mother's evidence is helping us connect cases that seemed unrelated. She didn't just document her own story, she created a map leading to every family these criminals destroyed. Teresa walked to the garden's edge, where the last of her mother's tulips still bloomed under the floodlights. Mom always said gardens were about hope, she said, touching a flower gently, about believing in something that would bloom long after you planted it. Mrs. McCarthy's last garden is blooming into justice, Detective Morrison said softly. And it's going to help heal a lot of families who never knew why they lost their loved ones. As the forensics team continued their careful excavation of Marion's garden, Bruce and the twins sat together on the old bench, surrounded by the physical manifestation of a mother's love and determination. The evidence she'd planted was bringing down a criminal empire, but more importantly, it had protected her children and preserved their faith in justice. There's one more thing, Adam said, opening the diary to its final pages. Mom left instructions for replanting the garden after the evidence was collected. She wrote out exactly which flowers to plant where to create a memorial garden for all the victims. She wanted something beautiful to grow from all of this pain. In the distance, sirens announced the arrival of more investigative teams, drawn by the expanding scope of Marion's evidence. But in the garden, under the stars, a family held on to each other and to the legacy of a woman who had fought evil not with violence, but with flowers and faith in her children's strength. Teresa touched the voice recorder in her pocket, containing Jana's unwitting confession from that rainy night. "Mom knew we'd survive," she whispered. "She made sure of it." 1 month after the garden excavation, the McCarthy family sat in a crowded courthouse conference room. Around them were dozens of other families, all victims of Jana's criminal network, each with a story of loss, manipulation, and grief. But today, they also had something else: hope. Marion McCarthy's evidence has led to 37 arrests so far, District Attorney Clarice Joshi announced, standing before a wall of photos showing the accused conspirators. "Thanks to her meticulous documentation, we've identified over 40 families who were targeted by this organization over the past 15 years. Teresa and Adam sat between their father and Detective Morrison, watching as photographs of their mother's garden were displayed on large screens. Each image showed how Marion had mapped her evidence, using her passion for gardening to create an underground archive that would eventually expose the truth. Your mother's diary helped us understand their whole operation," Detective Morrison explained quietly to the twins. "They targeted families with terminally ill patients, positioning their people as caregivers and medical staff. Jana was just one of their many operatives." Bruce reached for his children's hands as they watched Jana being led into the courtroom for her arraignment. She looked smaller now, her carefully maintained appearance faded after weeks in custody. Behind her came the fake officers who had tried to raid the McCarthy house and the nurse who had worked with her at the hospital. "The evidence Mrs. McCarthy gathered isn't just about crimes," DA Joshi continued. "It's about patterns. She documented how they chose their victims, how they manipulated medical records, how they gained their victims' trust. Because of her work, we can now protect other families from similar schemes." A woman in the second row stood up, tears streaming down her face. "My husband died under their care 3 years ago. Everyone said I was crazy when I suspected something was wrong. Now I know. Now I finally know the truth." One by one, other families shared their stories. The patterns were heartbreakingly similar: a terminally ill loved one, a seemingly